Hello everybody and welcome to the Import-Export Hub channel. Bogdan here, your host for the next 20-25 agonizing minutes. I hope that you are all doing great. And guys, without asking you to hit that rectangular red button below this video, let's jump into today's topic, which covers the exports and the imports of New Zealand, which is the sixth largest island country in the world with a population of roughly 5 million people, who in the last 40 or so years managed to move away from an agrarian economy to a more industrialized one with a lot of added value, if you ask me. It's a top performer in terms of exports when it comes to dairy products. You will see this in the following minutes. I think it's the largest exporter in terms of value, at least. For fresh kiwi fruits also is by far the largest exporter, but also when it comes to meat exports, as it is constantly in top 10 exporting countries, again relative to value. And if agriculture and goods producing activities contributed with roughly 47% at the beginning of the 1970s in the GDP composition, in 2020, these figures change quite a lot, as the service industries accounted for roughly two-thirds in the GDP composition, with agriculture and goods producing activities accounting for more or less 30%, and the remaining 4 to 6%, I don't know, coming from taxes. New Zealand has a lot of free trade agreements. It's a top foreign policy almost, and I'll mention just a couple of them that are currently in force. So we have the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. We have New Zealand-Australia Closer Economic Relations, which supposedly, it seems, it's one of the most open trading relationships of any two countries. But also free trade agreements, bilateral free trade agreements again with Hong Kong, Malaysia, Thailand, South Korea or China, just to name a couple. And now guys, with this short introduction being made, let's dive into the Excel sheets here. And let's see together who are the main drivers in terms of exports and imports, but also who are the main trading partners for 2021. And I will start with the export flow, and we see that in this 2017-2020 timeframe, the exports were relatively flat, hovering around $37.5 billion. And then we see this spike in 2021 when we have some $43.4 billion worth of exports, almost 16% more than in the previous year, with dairy produce, as I was telling you earlier, meat and wood driving constantly New Zealand's exports. Other important driver is chapter 8 here, in which kiwi fruits are driving, I don't know, 95-98% of the exports from this chapter. Chapter 22 is in this top list, so beverages, spirits and vinegar, but also chapters like 19, 35, 3, 84 or 76 with aluminium and articles thereof. In terms of year-on-year changes, in 2021, the exports went up almost 17% overall, with almost all the top 10 chapters in green, except here chapter 17, who had almost 12% contraction. Now, moving to the import flow, we see how the top 10 exports rank higher in the harmonized system code with chapters like, I don't know, 87, 84 or 85. Other important drivers are the mineral fuels and oils one, plastics, chapter 90, chapter 30, so pharma products, 73, 94, and the 10th one, it's chapter 23, so residues and waste from the food industries and prepared animal feed. In terms of the overall trend, if you want, the imports are more volatile than the exports, if you ask me. As for the year-on-year changes, we have almost 34% more imports in 2021 than in the previous year, so 2020. partially driven by strong imports coming from chapters like 87, 84 or 85. In the last two columns here, we have also the balance of trade, and I think it's the first country that I analyze, so to say, on this channel who has a negative balance of trade on all the top 10 imports. Chapters, of course, and I don't know, this could be explained by the fact that the policymakers and businesses there in New Zealand are very disciplined when it comes to imports, and basically they import more or less what they lack in the comparative advantages. It's just my opinion, but from a bird's eye view, if you want, I think that the New Zealand trade relations are very, very disciplined. Anyways, whatever the reason might be, let's move on to the trading partners. And as usual, I've picked up the top 5 chapters from each flow, and I will start with chapter 4 from the export flow. And we see here that in 2021, the exports grew with some 16%, bringing the absolute value close to $12.4 billion. With China here, Australia and Indonesia as the main destinations, but we have other important ones in this top 10 list, like, I don't know, Malaysia, Thailand or the United States, to mention just a couple of them. The biggest year-on-year change, both in relative and absolute values, happened here in relation with China, who in 2021 imported with some $1.6 billion more than it did in 2020. And it's worth following up if this increase is going to be held or not. Personally, my guess is that for 2022, the exports will be much lower and maybe closer to the 2017 figures. On the other side of the spectrum, we have lower values exported towards Australia, Japan, the United States, and the Philippines. And sadly, here too, I expect that the trend will continue its downwards trajectory. As for the main drivers, well, for both China and the United Arab Emirates, we have subheading 040221, so milk and cream in solid forms of a fat content, by weight bigger than 1.5%. And with this being said, I will move to the next chapter. So chapter 2, here we have some $6.2 billion worth of exports. Quite stable export values if we consider the 2017-2020 figures. And we have China, the United States, and Japan as the main destinations, but there are other important ones, of course, like the United Kingdom, Germany, or France. Again, just to mention a couple from this top 10 list. Relative to the year-on-year changes, New Zealand had almost 17% more exports than it did in 2020, with big positive changes here involving China, which is again the top performer, both in absolute and relative values, but also in relation with the United States and Japan. While in terms of contraction, the biggest one happened in relation with Germany, who imported with $45 million less than it did in 2020. For this chapter, I suspect a downward trajectory in relation with China, but as I've said earlier, it remains to be seen if this is going to materialize or not. Now, relative to the main export drivers, for the exports towards Japan, we have subheading 020230, so frozen boneless meat of bovine animals, while those towards Germany here were driven mainly by subheading 020442, so frozen cuts of sheep. Moving forward with the video, guys, the next sheets cover the exports for chapter 44, so wood and articles of wood and wood charcoal. And basically for 2021, we have almost $3.9 billion worth of exports, with China again dominating with, I don't know, 60-65% of New Zealand's exports from total exports from this chapter. Quite concentrated, if you ask me. Japan comes second, while South Korea sits on the third spot with some $224 million. Other important trading partners include here Australia, Taiwan, or Vietnam, but again, they are dwarfed by the values towards China. Relative to the year-on-year changes, the exports went up with some 33%, with big positive changes coming from China, South Korea, also the United States and Taiwan, at least if we consider the absolute values, while the exports towards Hong Kong and Vietnam put together had almost $16 million contraction. As for the main drivers from this chapter, well, both towards the United States and Vietnam, pine, which is a softwood type of tree, was the main driver. So we have here subheading 440711. And with this chapter also being covered, I will move to the fourth biggest one, which is chapter 8, so edible fruit and nuts. Kiwi fruit, more precisely. They are by far the largest exporting country, and we have here a nicely upward organic trend, if you ask me, in this 2017-2021 time frame. I think it's a very stable industry, and we see that in 2021 the total exports from this chapter amounted to some $2.8 billion, with China, European Union, not elsewhere specified countries or territories, I really don't know exactly, and Japan dominating, but there are other important destinations as well in this top 10 list, like, I don't know, the United States, India, or Vietnam. Here, the export concentration index is not that high, as we have three main destinations with, let's face it, more or less the same values. As I've said, I think that for this particular industry, the demand variability is very low and you can forecast better. Now, relative to the year-on-year changes, we have here an increase of roughly 8.3% in relative terms overall, which translates into $212.3 million in absolute figures, which is quite impressive, and except Japan, Australia, and Hong Kong, who all had year-on-year negative changes. With the rest of the top 10 trading partners, we have positive ones, with figures above $90 million for both China and European Union territories, not elsewhere specified. As for the main export drivers, it comes as no surprise really to see that fresh kiwi fruits are the main ones for both Taiwan and South Korea here. And with this being covered, I'll now move to my fifth and last export chapter. So we have here chapter 22. Beverages, spirits, and vinegar, and I see again a relatively stable organic growth in these last 5 years, with some $1.6 billion worth of exports for 2021. And we have the United States, Australia, and United Kingdom as the top three destinations. But of course, there are others like Canada, Germany, or Ireland. Again, just to name a few from this top 10 list. Relative to the year-on-year changes, we have an 8% overall increase, and except the United Kingdom, Germany, and the Netherlands, who all had contractions, with the rest of the top 10 partners, we have positive changes ranging from, I don't know, 3.3%, as in the case with Ireland, to some 121%, as in the case here with South Korea. And in case you're wondering what drives New Zealand's exports from this chapter, well, for both Australia and South Korea, wine is the main export driver. And now moving to the top 5 import drivers. The first one is chapter 87, so vehicles and their parts. And we see that for 2021, the figure is quite high, some $7.2 billion, well above the figures from the previous 4 years. And we have here Japan, Thailand, and Germany as the top 3 partners, But there are other important ones in this top 10 list, like, I don't know, China, Australia, or Italy, again, just to name a few. Now, regarding the year-on-year figures and the changes, all top 10 partners have positive figures, with the biggest absolute change happening in relation with Japan, who exported with some $840 million more in 2021 than it did the 2020, so the previous year. And even though all top 10 trading partners have positive changes, from my point of view, China here, if you look closely at China's trend in the last couple of years, has a relatively stable flow, and if nothing major happens, I repeat, nothing major happens, like some sort of geopolitical crisis, China will increase its share in the years to come. Moving now to the main drivers here. Well, from Thailand we have light-duty diesel trucks, and from the United Kingdom, so we have subheading 870324, so cars with an engine capacity above 3000 cubic centimeters, so basically cars with relatively big engines, at least for the European market. Moving now to the second biggest import driver for New Zealand in 2021, we have here chapter 84, and we see that for 2021 the total imports amounted to some $6.9 billion, with China, the United States, and Germany here as the top three partners, but we have other important ones like Japan, Thailand, or France, for example. We see again that all top 10 trading partners had positive changes in relation to what happened in 2020. The biggest absolute change happening here with China, who exported with some $593 million more. As for the main drivers here from China, the main one was subheading 847130, so basically laptops, while from Italy, appliances for pipes, boiler shells, tanks, and the like, so subheading 848180 drove most of the imports. Moving now to the third biggest import driver, is the third one. We have here chapter 85, another complex one, and we see that for 2021 the imports amounted to almost $4.4 billion, with again China, Vietnam, and Australia as the top three partners. The United States, Taiwan, or Indonesia are also in this top 10 list amongst others, but China here clearly dominates again with some $2.1 billion worth of exports towards New Zealand in 2021. While the other 9, if we combine their numbers, I don't think we reach China's values. Anyhow, just a quick reminder for you guys, this is not necessarily per se Chinese exports from, I don't know, Chinese brands, but exports from worldwide brands who have manufacturing and or assembly facilities there, which are then exported towards different countries, so they are accounted as China's exports in this case. Certainly, for some industries, China is adding value, but there are other industries in which China doesn't add too much value, but again, this is another story. So I was saying that China dominates the exports towards New Zealand. It seems that year on year almost all the trading partners had positive changes except Japan. Vietnam is gaining momentum, and it will continue to do so if you ask me. While in terms of main drivers here, from Vietnam, the main import driver is related to the mobile phones, while from Malaysia the main one is subheading 852872, so television sets. And with this being covered also, I will now move to the fourth biggest import driver, so mineral fuels and oils, chapter 27, and we have almost $4 billion worth of imports, with petrol producing countries, or I don't know, major refining centers as the main partners. And we have the United Arab Emirates, Singapore, Kuwait, or Brazil in this top 10 list. And we see here that except Malaysia and also the Russian Federation, the rest of the top 10 ones had positive changes ranging from, I don't know, $1 million to some $766 million, as in the case here with the United Arab Emirates. As for the main import drivers, guys, not that much product complexity from Singapore, which, by the way, is a major oil trading and refining oil hub. We have subheading 271019, while the main driver coming, the imports coming from Kuwait is crude petroleum, so subheading 270900. And finally, guys, with this chapter being covered as well, I will move to my last sheet. Bear with me for 2 more minutes, as we have here the 5th largest import driver for New Zealand in 2021. It's about chapter 39, so plastics and articles thereof. And we see that the imports amounted to some $2 billion, with China again, Australia, and the United States as the main trading partners. We have other important ones in this top 10 list, like, I don't know, Thailand, Singapore, or South Korea. And basically, it seems that 2021 was a really, really good year for all the top 10 partners, especially for China and Australia, who had the biggest absolute increase. And finally, as for the main drivers coming from this chapter, well, for both the United States and Germany, we have subheading 392690. And now, guys, with this last chapter being covered as well, that's all for today. Thank you all for watching. I really hope that you've liked it. Don't forget to hit whatever button you like below this video. And as usual, until next time, keep your business safe. Thanks.